Hello, everybody. It's Holger Mueller here from Constellation Research. Here for one of my favorite people, welcoming Jon from Diginomica. Hey, Jon, how are you doing?
Good. Getting in some trouble on Memorial Day with Holger. What could be better?
Yeah, what do this bad memories about talking about our recent experience in the Florida swamps, aka Sapphire 2025.
Indeed.
So that was a good thing, right? It was like the degree of me walking over from the Hilton to the Orange County Convention Center, the level of sweat was less than usual, right? Or what's your take?
Yeah, it was an interesting time. There's always so much to try to sort through. You were part of a couple of my favorite moments at the event too, including when I put you on the spot on the show floor. We were taping a podcast with ASUG, and I
Yeah,
I said, it was supposed to be an open questions format. I was like, Holger, show us how it's done with a really, pointed question, because that's, part of the Holger way, right? You're supposed to
yeah,
ask the pesky questions, and you did. You did a great job. You challenged
yeah.
you challenged the ASUG CEO on how they've influenced SAP. That was a great question, and it should be on the podcast. They're going to produce it, so hopefully it'll be out in a week or so. But
Oh, yeah.
anyway,
Listen,
nice
listen to
job.
the
That
podcast.
was fun.
Well, that was fun too. Yeah, I mean, note to self: don't walk through the show floor and see something,
Yeah,
and,
you never know
and you
when you get
don't be involved or not involved. Yeah,
pulled into a live recording. But no,
exactly.
I think it's really important because and this is something that I wrote about in my first piece on Diginomica on the show. But
Mhm.
SAP still has the traditional classic press conference, and also they had the whole analyst structure for us before the show. But you're not going to be able to address everything in your keynote sound bites, and so I partially judge vendors on to what extent they're going to let us ask those questions and get that information. And SAP provided a platform for that, so we were able to press the questions. And now we have to show the audience we actually learned something. So
Yeah, pressure is on us for that. Yeah, I agree on that. I kind of like missed that conference too. I think Thomas Saueressig and Jan Gilk got away way too easy there, not having getting the
oh yeah,
questions.
they
So
didn't have their
if
follow up presser, did they?
yeah, yeah, if Monica Schaller listens to this, right? I mean, then there should be the.
Come on, Monica, next year Thomas and Jan's got to do their
I
thing.
mean, and remember the three keynote format when Hasso had the Thursday. So when this was a 3 day show, there was even press conference then, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, we have to go back to two. Otherwise, I think it was overall a very good Sapphire for my view. Right? So if you want to say some overall pieces, but yeah, but I spared no expense, right? Thanks to the Constellation media budget, which is like this. But we have even slides for this,
Oh yeah,
right?
let's
Which
see the
of course they
slides.
need
Yeah.
to operate correctly, right? So obviously, now it's a Sapphire recap, and Jon came up with a format for this, right? Saying that we take our top three news items, right? And as you
Yep.
put me on the spot on the conference floor, like I put you on the spot here on the conversation floor and ask you what is your number one takeaway of
And it's
Sapphire?
going to be interesting to see if you and I have similar or different. Well, okay, so
Well, let's
SAP.
make a new rule. Let's make we have no repetitions allowed. How was that?
Yeah, exactly.
We can agree that would have been my number one, but
Right. So
yeah.
look, I mean, I had to go with SAP's competitive positioning around AI and the slew of AI announcements. So essentially, SAP clarifying its AI positioning, and there were a whole bunch of news items around this, including a bunch of Joule stuff, including Joule Everywhere, a Perplexity partnership. Maybe we'll get into a little bit of that. But the big underlying takeaway from all of those news stories is that SAP needed a pretty aggressive response, because there's a lot of vendors that have done shows this spring, most notably ServiceNow, that have really positioned vendors like SAP as legacy vendors that are going to be accessed through their agentic layer as simply a series of API calls. And obviously SAP, I don't happen to totally agree with that vision of things, but the point is, like, SAP's got to present a response to that resonates with their customers as to why you're going to work out of SAP for all of that stuff, and why SAP is going to be your home base for all of your agentic workflows. And so they got to push back, and we saw that push. And I don't think it was a coincidence, or maybe it was, but it was funny that one of the demos actually included us accessing a ServiceNow ticketing system through Joule. So hey, I mean, if Bill McDermott's going to take a few jabs, maybe you might respond. But anyway, the point is, there was a whole bunch of stuff that kind of fit into that, and what SAP called that, and you heard this buzzword on the first keynote, the flywheel effect, right? And, I don't know whether that phrase will stick or whether it was just a keynote thing, but it was funny because we were doing a watch party on the keynote, and Brian Summer was on there, and he said he would drink Dr. Pepper every time I said the flywheel effect. So I'm worried about Brian's health right now, because the flywheel effect was mentioned a whole bunch of times. That's a lot of Dr. Pepper. But essentially the flywheel effect that SAP was talking about there is essentially they claim the broadest application portfolio with the most mission critical business processes, and then the data and the apps. And of course you have to really look at the business data cloud play to kind of tie into that, and then this whole infusing AI into all of those apps. And so SAP claims that that's going to give them a unique competitive advantage in enterprise AI for their customers especially. Now, how that plays out, we're going to find out. That's going to take quite a while to play out, but SAP had to make that case, and so they did.
Yeah. No, excellent point. I think the way how the flywheel works, and maybe you said that, and I was thinking, like, how does it work really, is like, enterprise data is the gold standard for AI in the enterprise. Obviously, SAP has those because they're using the apps, right? You provide that as data, and then you do AI with this, right? And that AI triggers new enterprise data in the apps because the apps are augmented by Joule and whatever else. And so this is the flywheel, right? The funny thing is, I didn't like how they layer cake that, right? With the apps on the bottom, data in the middle, and AI on top, as if SAP was not an apps vendor, but an AI vendor, right? So I think, in my view of the world, gravity is on the bottom, right? The San Diego skyscrapers or whatever skyline is grounded, right? So grounding is always data, right? And then you have SAP, you have apps on top of the data if you don't want to have multiple layers, and AI is augmenting the apps. And you might have a standalone AI as well, which is talking to your data, right? You might have two outlets, right? But I don't see that AI is just on top as the only layer, but we'll see. That flywheel will mature.
Well, and you hit on an important point maybe we can return to, which is sort of the future of enterprise applications, because the implication of remarks made by folks like Satya Nadella and many others is that the apps are becoming a commodity. And I don't happen to agree with that, but to your point, if you're a big apps builder like SAP, you maybe don't want to play into that storyline. So anyway, we can revisit that a little bit later on. What was your top takeaway? Do you have a slide for that?
So yeah. Good. Thank you for reminding me to advance.
No problem.
Slides.
Let's do your slide, man.
Slides. Do we allow repetitions or not?
Yeah. Repetitions allowed because it's got to be spontaneous. We haven't compared notes, so let's just see.
Yeah, sure. No. So for me, it's the rounding out of the overall AI strategy. It's for the first time on AI already. I think Phil Herzig and the team have done a good job. Where I always like when a vendor strategy is understandable, and especially when it's a huge architecture topic like AI, and then you can see how the bits and pieces are building on each other, right? You see an announcement from summer last year, and also from fall last year, and also from spring, and now from early summer, and it all kind of like logically builds up, and you can understand as a customer, as a partner, as an analyst, as a media person, whatever, understand how this is really working. And of course, the data lake announcement in February threw a wrench into that to a certain point, right? But it threw a good wrench into it, putting SAP even in the position that if we compare them with their key competitors, with Oracle and with Workday, they don't have a data lake strategy announced yet, right? I mean, I say yet because, of course, there will be one. Actually, to be fair, Oracle announced an intelligent data lake, which is going to GA for the analytics side, right? Analytics plays a huge role with it, right? The spokesperson for data lake is Irfan Khan with the analytic background and baggage related to that. So I think that's the good thing to see, that because everything is about AI. AI is very important. AI is saving SAP now. This is why it's so important from my perspective, because we saw the Q1 numbers, SAP in the public earnings, and the S/4HANA public cloud numbers are picking up, right? And they're not picking up because SAP has figured out how to do ERP, right? That's one of my big concerns. What's the vision for ERP? SAP is the market leader for ERP. They need to know that. But it's because companies don't want to miss out, cannot afford to miss out on the AI side. And for that, they need to get moving to the public cloud, because everybody knows I will only get to those GPUs or to this cloud infrastructure pieces if I'm in the public cloud, right? No matter if I get served by cloud proprietary chip development, which all the clouds have, or if I'm going to bank on NVIDIA to be present in every cloud, whatever that is, right? Different strategy, different conversation for another day. So that's my number one, a cohesive forward strategy for AI. Yeah.
I largely agree with that, but I just wanted to ask you in that context, what did you think of SAP's Capgemini Mistral announcement to deploy AI models for regulated industries, which is obviously in highly regulated industries, they're low to look at public clouds to consume AI. How do you reconcile that?
Yeah, I think we will see lots of these partnerships, right, of ERP vendors with an SI, because enterprise need help with AI, and potentially an LLM vendor like Mistral in this case. And then you might have even a European slant, right, because Capgemini and Mistral from France, whatever. So there's a European angle for European people being worried the data might be in the US. So it's nice differentiating offers, but I think we'll see lots of vertical ERP vendor, SI, and AI model partnerships happening, which is good because you will build something prepackaged for a difficult, challenging industry, like regulated industries, like in this example. I would be worried to be tied to that LLM vendor model, because who knows who's leading at what point, right? And right now it's a horse race. You don't have to be worried if your vendor is only number 5. Oh my God, you have to switch because they come up with something new and they're going to be number 1 or 2 again. But this could also change in the longer run, where you see clear trends where LLM vendors being less competitive and losing traction. Yeah, so
well, you're right about that, because one of my biggest takeaways from the spring is how most vendors, even the ones that were initially aligned with one LLM, are finding that different LLMs seem to work better for different use cases, and increasingly seem to be adopting much more of an agnostic approach, swapping them in and out easily. So that's an interesting point to keep an eye on. Yeah.
And that's been something of the strength that SAP has actually paid dearly to a certain point, because they need to run on multiple clouds and with multiple LLMs, and that portability or that freedom of choice has always been there, right, for the customers when they will build something custom. And it's a great part of the SAP DNA, starting with the database days in the 90s, right? So I think it's a good sign that it's there, but it took a long time for the Herzig's team to build that abstraction layer to be able to go to all these different LLMs on these different clouds, right? So yeah, so that's basically, if you compare it, for Oracle, almost unfair. Of course, Oracle AI, there's no question, they went right away in building stuff, and SAP still had to build their abstraction layers to make it work in multiple clouds. Now, pros and cons in both approaches, of course. Yeah,
indeed.
Shall we advance?
All right.
My sophisticated slides. Yeah, what is Jon's number 2?
Okay, so there's a lot to unwrap here, but it's
more... sorry. Did I jump the gun? Did I move too fast?
No, this is good. There's a lot to unwrap here, but it's more the private cloud side, I guess, but it's basically Rise is here to stay, but it's different. Now SAP's done a whole lot of renaming around a bunch of stuff, and some commercial go-to-market differences as well. So long story short, Rise is getting confusing in some ways and more simpler in other words, because Grow is now only for net new customers. So existing SAP customers running public cloud ERP, are now going to be part of Rise. But anyway, you get the gist. But basically, SAP said at one point, I think it was maybe Thomas had said that 40% of customer revenue is now flowing through Rise contracts. So Rise isn't going anywhere. I'll point out a few interesting things while we're on the subject of naming. S/4HANA notably disappears from the lingo completely. I think that's an important little point, because at one point that was a really, really big branding exercise. It was gone this year. By the way, no more Insight apps for BDC while we're at it. Bye Insight apps. Those are now intelligent apps. So let's get our lingo down right. Always fun with SAP.
Good point.
But one of the things here is, just kind of this general theme of customers needing help with core migrations to the latest. And I issued a podcast with the director, UKI user group, UKI Ireland user group, UKI SUG, it's called, Connor Riordan. You can check the podcast out. But he talks a lot about how customers need to migrate. They want to consume innovations on the latest SAP software, but they need a lot of help with this technical migration and try to justify it from a business case perspective. While I was at Sapphire, I asked the leader of the German user group, Jens Hungerhausen. I probably screwed up your last name, Jens. Sorry about that.
It's all fine. It's all fine.
Yeah, exactly.
DSAC.
Yeah, DSAG, exactly. I asked him about this because he's a tough customer. It's not easy for SAP to please the German user group. And while he has a lot of concerns around access to innovation for on-premise customers, and I'll write about this a little bit in an upcoming piece, he did like the second keynote in particular, Thomas and Jan, and some of the things they were talking about on how to support customers, in particular going to public cloud ERP, but in general, getting the costs of transformation projects down. And along those lines, when I said kind of RISE is here to stay, but it's different, part of that is SAP's emphasis on the so-called tool chain and how SAP really does believe, SAP's leadership really believes that they can derive a different kind of value for their customers with all of these tool chain products working in concert with each other. So that's Signavio, LeanIX, Cloud ALM, and now WalkMe. And so the question for customers becomes how soon and when, and that's always a problem at enterprise shows, understanding what's available now versus later. The tool chain's kind of complicated, and in fact, Signavio and LeanIX are well integrated already. Cloud ALM has more than 10,000 customers. That's a free product. The others are not. Now SAP is saying the three of those products are well integrated. There were some customer stories about that at Sapphire, but unfortunately I missed those sessions, so I can't fully update on that. But think of it in terms of running in the cloud means managing processes from the prototype stage with Signavio into design and implementation. And basically this sort of continuous monitoring is sort of the idea, where you can really document your business processes, your metrics, your KPIs, and monitor all of that in real time. So it's clear to understand why that could be very valuable to customers, but exactly when and how that really becomes core to what SAP has to offer remains to be seen. But make no mistake, SAP's making a big stink about it, and they think it's important.
Yeah, and I think it's the suite message, right? It's not only the suite message in terms of horizontally building an enterprise suite, right, which is part of the renaming, right? Business suite, all of a sudden S4HANA gone. We're back to business suite. Didn't we hear that?
Yeah, and we heard a lot of talk around, I could have also talked around best of suite and suite as a service, but there's a whole lot of talk around suite at SAP right now. So yeah, the business suite is back. We missed you. We missed you, business suite. Glad you're back.
Yeah, glad that you're back.
Yeah.
Which was the hard thing for people to upgrade, and now they want them to go back, right? There's a whole packaging and pricing conversation which we can have, but absolutely right point. But the same thing applies, obviously, to the aid and abetting, right? The helpers for that, right? Which is a transformation suite with Signavio, with LeanIX, and of course with WalkMe, right? So I think it kind of like is a differentiator for SAP, so that makes sense for them to talk to. Cloud ALM, what a success story, right? Also from my commentary perspective, I'm the new solution manager, right? And being, what choice do I have, right? I want to have those tools, and potentially, right? I think down the year, like in the second half, we'll hear about people upgrading and moving to S4HANA Business Suite, whatever's going to be. They will mention Cloud ALM as being so much better than Solution Manager, which SAP has not been investing so much anymore in the last 10 years, like they should have, knowing that the future will be different. Yeah.
A story to watch in terms of how this plays out. SAP does have a number of customers that are now running Cloud ALM, Signavio, and LeanIX in concert. So we need to see those stories and see what kind of benefits are emerging from that. And like I said, there were a few at Sapphire, so let's track those and see. But SAP thinks that's a different kind of value. And that gets back to when RISE was initially offered, and there was this transformation as a service tagline, which at the time I thought was really laughable. But these tools actually potentially make that somewhat possible. And so, I would say better late than never on that.
Yeah. Quick reminder, we're still on John's number 2.
Yeah, what's your number 2,
one,
man?
then your number 1. Interesting, but that's all fair. Like, look just at the minutes as they're ticking by, but very good, fair point.
Yeah, I'll make my number 3 is going to be faster, so.
No worries. Shall we move on?
Yeah.
All right, my number 2 is going to be the risk of sounding boring, the Business Data Cloud. The reason is that is something which SAP should have done 12 years ago. I was in a Q&A with Hasso Plattner back then, and Bernd Leukert, who was in charge, and said, what about Hadoop-style technologies, which became a standard question to Hasso, and he would ask it for the years to
come.
Every
year was Holger's big data question.
Yeah,
every year it was like clockwork.
I got different questions, or different answers
Yeah.
from no, this is not the way, to yeah, we need to do something. Then SAP didn't do something. Then they did once the data warehouse cloud, I believe it was, and everything looked gory, and then it didn't happen, and now it's finally there, right? And why did I hammer SAP so much on that? Because customers that advanced, the progressive customers would ask for that, right? They would say, like, I have so much non-structured data which I need to correlate with my business data, and I had to do it myself. And the funny thing, right, in February at the launch, where it was Christian Klein on stage with, I always miss up his name, Goxie, whatever, the CEO of Databricks, is like, and our customers have been saying how hard it is to get the data out of SAP. Yeah, exactly, that's very, very hard. So good for SAP to have Evolution. Sapphire was the first conference of having that in public. A little confusion in terms of like how much of the data will go in there. I think SAP is still on a thinking phase. The new inside apps now being the intelligent apps, where I thought there's a chance there's just a thin provisioning to these applications. SAP will only provide that. But in the Q&A, I think you were there as well. Irfan Khan said very clearly, no, it's going to be a basic load of basically everything, which is in, well, we'll see, S4HANA, MySAP ERP, SAP Business Suite. And that's what needs to be happening, has to be happening. It's interesting because it's going to be copies, because you'll have the data in Business Data Cloud, and then you can move all that also in Databricks. And then also, Christian Klein said it, Irfan confirmed it, there will be other partners, right? So not all is lost for Teradata, maybe, yes, so for Cloudera and friends to who are the alternatives to Databricks to play a role, or the other cloud providers, right? To natively bring it into the big data capabilities of a public cloud. Yeah. So fundamentally very important. Like I say, the future of ERP, there's a functional aspect to that. There's an architectural aspect, right? This is moving the architectural aspect for the future of ERP into relevance for SAP for the next 20 years or so. Yeah.
Yeah, and just a really quick comment on that. I think one of the things you need to listen for with SAP on that is examples of why the semantic relationships they're able to preserve in the Business Data Cloud are important to AI, because otherwise you could use a lot of non-SAP solutions for various kinds of data lakehouses and stuff like that, and various agentic platforms as well. And SAP is trying to say, well, go ahead and do that, and you can pull the information out of SAP through API, but you're not going to have that rich semantic context, and you're going to have to rebuild a lot of information, and we have a much better solution. So customers need to look at that and see if it's true or not.
Yeah,
so,
I agree. There's always the talk about the semantic layer. My take there is the semantic layer is something which, with lots of blood, sweat, and tears, you can figure out. Something that SAP is rebuilding the schema of the underlying apps, like every release or something like this. The problem is that you want to have the continuous update of information, like SAP choose Iceberg as the format, into that data lakehouse, whatever you want to call it, a data lake for SAP, right? That you have the latest relevant information. And it has to be even close to real time, right? Because if I have a upsell agent, if I'm recommending training for an employee, what are the other learnings based on this one, learning courses you should take, qualifications you should take. This is a living, breathing thing which agents need to operate on. It needs to be continuously updated and cannot be like yesterday's data warehouse update anymore, right? So that is the real value, right? That some intelligence on the transactional app pushes out in some way. We can figure out what the mechanism is into my intelligence AI data lake layer to have that information.
You need a real-time data feed for AI for sure, at the so-called point of inference, but it also needs to understand what that data means. And that's the problem, is that sometimes you're feeding data into the real-time AI that doesn't have the proper context. So for example, the AI doesn't realize that this vendor is actually a subsidiary of this other vendor, and SAP is saying in Business Data Cloud we feed the AI with that type of information, and the third party AI system is not going to have that, and so it's going to be mistake prone, and you're going to waste a lot of time trying to rebuild that back into the data. Now, whether SAP is right or wrong about that, I think is one of the interesting storylines. And to what extent can you work around that, and to what extent do you need the Business Data Cloud? So let's find out. But at least now SAP is in the conversation, whereas before they were not. So
yeah, the super interesting thing to watch there coming in the second half is going to be the SAP knowledge graph, right? Which is exactly doing this, right? Where can I say, is this entity the holding company, the headquarter, or is it a subsidiary? Is there a governing agreement, and all these things there, right? So the experiment is still open there, right? So they're saying it's encouraging, but who knows, right? It's never been done before to have a knowledge graph of that size. Licensing, is it the customers, the SAPs, right? Do you have to pay for it? It's going to be by shot. How fast does it get updated, right? I mean, I always like tell the story of the LinkedIn graph, right? Who's connected with who? In the old days, would only get updated once a week, right? So we could connect and we would see that, but our connections would not see this because LinkedIn graph for people connected to us wouldn't see that, right? Once a week, they could boil the ocean, right? So it's going to be super interesting. Lots of questions around the knowledge graph.
I'll get back to that topic in a sec.
Okay, perfect.
But
Are you ready for your number
press
3?
on. Yep. I'm going to make this one fast.
Here we go for Jon's number 3. All right, time is running.
Yep. So I'll make this one fast, which is SAP's continuing to really emphasize the public cloud ERP, which is no longer S/4HANA Public Cloud Edition, but whatever. The point is SAP's emphasizing that, and for a lot of different reasons, including what you mentioned around easier to absorb AI functionality. And I think SAP could push even harder on that message. I have my next article coming out is with the manufacturer, Western Sugar, running on the public cloud that's in fact exhorting other private cloud customers. If I could do it, you could do it. We moved, a number of years ago, our manufacturing onto the public cloud. Stop waiting, get onto the public cloud. I think it's a great message to hear from a customer, and I'm looking forward to writing up the story.
That's I mean, public cloud is revenue which investors want to see, right? And growing from that. And I think for a manufacturing company, which have all these traditional things to run the shop floor on USB sticks even, right? And technophobia on the show floor. If I put Wi-Fi there, what if my employees play on their phones and don't make sure that forklift is running them over or whatever, is really comforting factor. And we knew this would happen. The question is when it's happened for the installed base. So I look forward to your article on that, right? So, yeah. Hey, congratulations. That one was short, right? Pressure is on me now.
Oh, yeah.
It's
got to tighten this up.
Exactly. So here we go. So the risk of sounding boring, right? My number 3 is BTP, right? So there was times like when I would challenge Bill McDermott and saying, will he say pass? It wasn't called BTP at the time. He said, yes, I will. And he would never do. So with Christian, there's been right away a CEO which knows what the importance of a platform is. And the platform is being strengthened. And there was some risk, like, will the AI stuff, BDC stuff grow in separate things and not in this? And that was very clear. Slowing down stuff and excitement here. There's really clear alignment around that BTP is the platform. Things run on BTP in connection with BTP. And there will be also very interesting scenarios where pieces of the overall platform play a role, because we just said before, my number 2, right? You have to have real time, see what other things happen. So a lightweight transaction database, which of course for SAP means HANA, needs to be somehow present in the data layer for AI. How they're going to call this, how that's going to be, what that's going to be remains open, right? But the strengthening the AI advantages, right? I'm very hopeful on the ABAP LLM coming out in the second half of the year to understand code, to write better code than humans can possibly do, because been trained on very clean, very clear ABAP from the makers of ABAP. That's all exciting news coming out in the second half, and can't wait for TechUp to happen. And it's so crucial because there's so many things that SAP doesn't have in automation. So the only solution for the customer is, if I really, really need this, right? Have I customized it before, extended this before? Can I move it to S/4HANA Public Cloud or Business Suite Cloud or whatever it's going to be called? Or do I have to write it myself, right? Do I have to fill that gap? And how fast can me or a partner fill that gap? It's going to be super critical.
And just real quick on that too, on the Western Sugar story that I'm doing, they had to build some differentiating manufacturing capabilities via BTP. And he said, it's been 3 years since we went live, and they've done a bunch of core upgrades since then. He said it hasn't broken once. So that's the whole point of the extensibility platform, is that it provides you a different way of building out functionality that doesn't break, that allows you to preserve the core. And it was great to hear a customer say it's working for them. And the other thing too is that BTP becomes really, really important to SAP's AI strategy, because it allows customers on older releases to access AI functionality from partners and also build their own to an extent that they felt like in the past they maybe couldn't, because of SAP's emphasis on Joule and on the latest and greatest. So BTP is important to SAP because it gives customers access to at least some AI functionality, and there's a bunch of partners building really cool stuff on BTP also. So I think that's a good takeaway.
Correct. And let's not forget, one of the things where the verdict was out and is turning from concerned to positive is SAP has done massive effort via third parties to build out-of-the-box integration to third-party products in Integration Suite in BTP. And there's always been vendor-provided examples and so on in the history of integration vendors. Might that be best of breed, like the Mueller, Serve Methods, Informaticas, and so on, or ERP vendors saying, or CRM vendors, we now own the integration. It always failed because maintaining these is hard. It's now 4 years for some of those integrations, and obviously the underlying systems have changed, and they're still running. So good job of making for the first time vendor-supported integration with Integration Suite happening, which, if we come to the biggest surprise, teaser to what we're doing next, right, is going to be super, super crucial. Yeah. Perfect.
All right.
Are we happy, ready to progress too? I teased the surprise already. All right. What did SAP get right?
Okay, so I'll make this one quick too. I really liked how the keynote, especially the day one keynote, really focused on the customers on stage, these more in-depth interviews that really captured the challenges customers were facing, including NBC Universal and Kind, which is a Mars Snacks subsidiary, doing a public cloud sort of a combo subsidiary play, but really laying out the challenges, like NBC talking about more than 40 revenue subledgers and SAP systems integrated across so many systems in the company. How do they fix all of this footprint? And I really like that they were just openly allowing those challenges to be discussed, and how they were going to be resolved, of course, was a big focus of the keynotes, and that's great. What are the solutions to that? And if you just go back 1 year, when SAP brought up on stage to start off Sapphire, AWS, NVIDIA, and Apple right in a row, which are really potent companies, obviously, serious companies, but hard to relate to those stories if you're a typical SAP customer. And even there was like a Vision Pro demo happening on stage, and at that point I was like, what the heck? And Vision Pro this year is already a discredited product, so it's really awkward to think back to that keynote and giving that time to those vendors. So I really, really liked SAP's emphasis this year. I think they got that right.
Totally agree with you. I think Christian Klein's best keynote, like if he's a head figure for the keynote, right? The day one keynote at Sapphire is the CEO's keynote, and the right balance between product, demo. I always like an integrated SAP is a suite level demo. It's a good product offering. They showed a suite level demo, even with personified CXOs on stage. That was very good. You mentioned the partners as well, where we had an SI partner. CEO wouldn't shut up, but that's a different problem, which happened there. But no, very well-rounded keynote, and also not just the standard AI view, right? And we can lead over into, with no ado, to my got right? Got an aggressive, differentiating but feasible, right? To your point, right? What's the Apple Vision Pro going to do in the enterprise? It was already clear last year that it was struggling and potentially tanking, and was maybe last hooray from Apple as a partner and customer to push in the demo and hoping, maybe some SAP customers will buy these things. But with the my number three, my biggest surprise is like the vision on the AI side, which they're doing with WalkMe, right? So with WalkMe being the digital adoption platform, the DApp, right? Shout out to my former colleague, Alan Lipovsky, which formed the category DApp. It was one of the highlights of category creation, Constellation Research.
I love the DApp category. Who doesn't love DApp? I mean,
digital adaptation platform, adaptly mentioned and thrown in for me. So shout out to Alan Lipovsky. But that gives WalkMe the ability to record screens in different applications. From building, this is how you should work, product X, right, which was the thing, and then hopefully get to the adoption. And now that, of course, can also be a launching pad of getting that screenshot, interpreting the screenshot, making sense what's seen there. So SAP is the first ERP vendor, the first applications vendor, I would say, correct me if I'm wrong, here, who is doing things beyond its own reach, and not the classical way beyond its own reach, which would say, we come back to what I said before in the BTP integration suite. We can get third-party data into our data lake, and then you or someone can build things on top. No, this is through SAP native capability or WalkMe native capability, which gets the screen, makes sense of the screen, and builds something on top of that. So not something which is technically, how they're going to do this, right? How they're going to get an Apple Vision Pro product out there, but really tangible possibility of doing this and really differentiating, and not only helping on the adoption side, but even making sense, because if you think of the ERP system to be the center of the world for a moment, which for pretty much matters of purpose of statutory reporting, legal, whatever it technically, tactically, practically is, then that is very, very super powerful, because everything moves around that center of the world, and everything only makes sense, or will make sense, if it's reflected there, right? I could go into Salesforce and WalkMe digital adoption platform thing and say, oh, this opportunity is not yet in order. So this customer, even so it's won, will never get a delivery of something because for whatever reason the interface didn't run, or you haven't classified it to move it over. So very, very powerful to have the tentacle, I would call it, from WalkMe out there to get this done. So if SAP managed to pull this off, strong differentiator, very hard for their top 3 competitors, Oracle and Workday, to get something similar done. They can acquire someone. Doing browser plugins is not a shoot to the moon or an impossible to replicate strategy, but really nice differentiating longer-term vision beyond what they just announced on the AI side. So
well, one really interesting thing too, just quick on that, is that I think SAP has had some acquisitions. I won't name them now, but we could talk about them another time. They haven't worked out so good. SAP leadership, when I talk with them about WalkMe, there's a growing excitement because they're realizing all of the so-called, you could call it, I guess, data exhaust if you want, but everything that's generated by the WalkMe platform is really potent for SAP's AI use cases. So they're really excited.
Right, and we heard more than one time Christian Klein saying, right, the WalkMe acquisition is really paying off nicely. And I don't think he was thinking about digital adoption, because that, on the flip side, wasn't much mentioned, right? So it takes a long time. Right? The Signavio integration is only happening in the second half. I'm not sure what SAP was doing. I mean, now it proves out to be a blessing, because 2 years ago there wasn't data lake, so they were building all that integration. But yeah, fine. All right. Good. Our top positive surprises. More cloud from Jon, and WalkMe AI everywhere from me. So shall we move on?
Indeed.
And what SAP got wrong?
Okay, here we go. Well, I had a couple contenders. One of my contenders was, I thought from the keynote stage there was way too much sort of implication around, kind of romanticizing AI reasoning, which is a hotly debated topic actually, and this notion of autonomous AI, I thought was getting ahead of where customers are at. But I didn't actually include that as what SAP got wrong, only because, like, off stage, I heard a lot more background on things like knowledge graphs. Maybe I'll get back to that a little more. A2A and SAP's participation in these interoperable agent frameworks and standards. I would have liked to hear more about that, but I did hear a lot about that in off stage and interviews and stuff like that. So that's my runner up. But the one I did not like gets back to your partner thing. I didn't like, and I have nothing against Ernst & Young, but I would have taken that partner time and featured 3 innovative partners doing really cool things that customers don't know about, because there's so many partners right now that are not household names that are building incredibly cool solutions, whether it's AI and agentic stuff on SAP, or whether it's DevOps stuff or migration tooling or process monitoring. There's so many cool partners. I would have gone with a different story. And by the way, one interesting thing is EY isn't even running public cloud SAP going forward. And there's at least one of their major competitors that's running live on public cloud. I'm not going to say who it is out of respect to EY, but they're not even a public cloud story in professional services, which is SAP's most mature area within the public cloud. So I would have given that keynote time to upstart partners and really showed the range of partners. I think we all know about EY, PwC, Deloitte, IBM, all of those. It would have been really cool to showcase some up and coming partners. So that's my only thing.
You're absolutely right. I think they also were not even on time. The SAP people were strangely worried the keynote was too long, and I thought, no, the keynote is only too long if you don't have new stuff to show. So I absolutely agree with you, showing more of the dynamic ecosystem on the partner side to help people and to compel them further to move to the public cloud. It's something.
And I would just say customers, like, look, because there's so many cool partners out there right now doing cool stuff. So just look beyond. Not that you wouldn't ultimately end up doing some business with the Accentures of the world as well, and the EYs, they're doing cool stuff, but cast a wider net is all I would say there.
Right.
So.
Yeah. All right. My what SAP got wrong. Usually this is the toughest category because SAP gets so much wrong. In this case, I only come with like 2-3 things from my perspective up here. And I would have liked to see more about the business applications and what they're doing there. But there's a new SAP event coming out in fall about the line of business applications, as they were called now, the Business Suite members and so on. The pricing is potential one. But really, for me, I maybe falsely had much higher and I still don't know the abbreviation correctly, right? So the customer success and support, whatever organization, I call it the Thomas Auer-Essig, the Sauer-Essig org, right? I had higher expectations of them being able to show more things of helping customers to transform, understanding their setup, having like an out-of-the-box upgrade assistant, upgrade migration tools, more migration success stories, right? If memory doesn't fool me, I mean, it was Wednesday a week ago, so it feels like even longer. Was there even a reference customer that took advantage of the new tools and offerings moving? I mean, maybe being wrong and maybe pushing too hard there and too early there, right? It was also interesting. I mean, never had a sales leader done as many things like Jan Gilg on that show. Usually, sometimes sales leader would MC like Rob Enslin did. So I was hoping to see more from adoption of customers to move to the public cloud, in comparison. So we might see that in the second half. I'm sure they're working hard on it. We got some preview in the analyst track from Anja Schneider, right? What they're doing, that's all promising. But I'm wondering, why is that so much back, right? Is it lack of investment, lack of clarity? Are we holding things because data cloud is going to fix it? Or there's high hopes on the knowledge graph and there's high hopes on the ABAP models potentially? That's all rational reasons why not having that. But I would have liked to see a roadmap, right? What can I expect as a customer in the summer of 25, in the fall of 25 to move myself to the public cloud?
I wish I could disagree with you on that, because it'd be spicy if we could have some big disagreements in this video, but I just don't disagree with that. If anything, I would sort of double down on it and say I was hoping for more there too. And this is a common problem I see with enterprise vendors. I don't know if you see this as well, but it feels like the last thing that gets AI attention within their roadmap is helping their own customers with things like migration, landscape management, and project monitoring. I've said before, why don't every customer have the equivalent of an Apple Watch on their wrist with all their project monitoring statistics, and why isn't AI overseeing that and alerting to issues and proactively and all of that? I'm not saying that none of that is happening, but I feel like that's really behind a lot of the other kinds of AI that vendors are developing, and I don't understand why. So, yeah, I mean, to me, I would go so far as to say is the pressure is on SAP to deliver more of that for the Tech Ed season, and if they don't, it's going to be a really big miss. And when we get on video at Tech Ed, it's going to be like a big miss if they don't get this.
If nothing happens there for a year till Sapphire next year, I mean, you can't expect anything Madrid with next week. Right. That's not going to look good. But the irony is, AI might be so much of a pool that the numbers are good anyway.
Yeah, but you got to be a little careful about that, and that's why it's so interesting, like the dialogue between people like you and me and the financial analyst community, right? Because and I love talking with financial analysts sometimes about this stuff, because they're like, oh, the cloud adoption numbers, and I'm like, well, let's dig a little deeper here and look at this customer base and the ones that haven't migrated yet, and those have to be heavy on SAP's mind. And you know, I keep talking with SAP about this because I keep saying migration's not even enough. You know, that's important, but what's really important is that customers perceive you as the transformation partner going forward. That's the relationship that you want. If you don't get that, then someone else is going to get that relationship going forward, as we discussed in the beginning of this video, and then you essentially become that data repository, and you have a back office perception, and that's everything that SAP is fighting against. So anyway, I agree with you, and I think they could have done more.
SAP is vulnerable, right? SAP is the only of the major ERP vendors who needs a major platform upgrade change for its customer base. And if that effort is too high, smart people might say, hey, best practices, I need to write this out. And even so, if SAP will win the majority of those tenders, there's going to be some challenge there. So getting this right, I expected more. But hey, happy to be wrong, happy to be disappointed. There have to be some things which they need to be better.
Right.
How about a bonus section? I have a question for you, as you put me on the spot on the show floor. What's your take on the new business suite packaging?
Oh, yeah. So they didn't. I kind of left that alone a little bit because they didn't talk about it much at the show. But it was in a press release that they put out. So I'm not sure, but in a nutshell, they're talking about these sort of persona-driven packages, right? Like what are some of them? They're finance. There's HR core. There's manufacturing. There's a number of them, right? No pricing to them, right? Interesting. So I looked at, because I cover HCM, I looked at this.
And the HR core has a monthly price from $17, and that is list, right? That's before you start negotiating. And we all know how good these negotiations percentages can be, right? And it's per blocks. You have to buy blocks, obviously. Per
Oh, and by the way,
yeah.
SAP's changing its AI pricing around, which kind of connects into all of this too. I'm not sure how much of that has been announced, but so basically, and look, I mean, every vendor is clarifying its AI pricing, so that's nothing new for SAP. This is a work in progress with how do you price this effectively. Look,
yeah, but this is a pricing change for the bread and butter piece. This is not the AI pricing.
No, right? I realize it's just, in this case, it's the bread and butter, but it connects to the AI in some ways because now you're going to consume AI in the context of these personas. But the point is, like, I like the idea of SAP trying to tackle the needs of the line of business user. And if you watch the first 10 minutes of the Sapphire keynote from day one, you'll see how serious SAP is about that, because they have this interaction between the lines of business that I actually thought was pretty effective. I thought it was going to be really cringy, but I thought it was pretty good. And look, SAP's always, had that sort of CIO driven audience in terms of a lot of the people that show up and say, I'm an SAP, I own the project, are CIOs, and that's starting to change. And I think you need to appeal these personas. Whether or not this is going to work or not, I don't know. I guess I feel like I don't know enough yet to know, but I think it's an interesting step. Do you have a take?
I agree with you. So first of all, every user knows who's bought enterprise software. Pricing never changes to make things cheaper. No enterprise software changes their software pricing, but at least in their modeling, who knows how reality will play out. But in their modeling, they're going to have less, right? Nobody does that. If they simplify it in the process, power to them. What I like is always the competitive ramifications, right? And the only one I click quickly through the website, the only one which has a price per user is this HR Core package, which gives you basically HR Core and global processing for 100 countries and territories. And there, the $17 list is a very, very competitive price, because we know, like, again, 30, 40, 50% discount can happen, do happen on those, right? There's footholds. You have to buy blocks per users. You have to commit for a year, but who doesn't commit for 1 year, and maximum 3 years, right? But interesting that, and I think it's pointed against the Workday to a certain point, to make the HR Core capabilities with payroll. And quick shout out to payroll, right? I asked Chris and Klein in our Q&A how to differentiate to Oracle and to Workday, and in both cases, payroll came up. So if anybody hears this on the payroll development investment side, right, build more payrolls, right? So no question about that. Yep.
I think my message to SAP there would be like, let's get some more information out on that so that you and I can have a more informative discourse about it, because I just don't have a lot to give you yet, because I don't want to cross boundaries on some of the analyst stuff. I'm not sure how much of that is out there yet, because like I said, if you go watch the keynotes, you're not going to hear much about this, but it is on a press release, and so I expect we'll hear a lot more. Sounds like
it's interesting how this triggers, right? They announced the business suite thing in February. Now there's, I would say, clarity to Sapphire. It's still not clear, right? They're taking an awful long time. But hey, it's very important for them to get this right, so nobody's going to blame them. But the expectation, of course, for them to get it right, the longer they take, the more it's there, right? And the more it's in the financial year where revenues have to be shown, expectations have to be met. So
I think one thing that would be interesting for customers to watch, like you said, around the $17 is not just the price, but how easy it is for them to understand it. Because SAP's classic approach to pricing was like work it out directly with SAP. And it will be interesting to see if it becomes more and more a transparent thing where you can actually go online and kind of figure out for yourself like what the general costs are going to be around this. So anyway, we'll find out.
Right.
Time will
tell,
but
this simplifies, right? To give them power to that simplifies the SAP HCM portfolio, because you have HR Core, and then you have a package for learning and career development, one for pay for performance, and one for talent acquisition. And that's it. So definitely they achieved the purpose of making it easier.
Sounds like it. It sure does. Sounds like it.
So we'll see how it pans out for the other ones, because funnily HR is a little more easier than the other ones. Yeah. Perfect. What did we forget? What did we miss? Anything else? You want to ask me something?
Nothing else really. Let's see. Well, I'm still working. I'm going to be writing about some of these interesting AI discussions because I met with both Walter Sun and Sean Kask, who's the Chief AI Strategy Officer, and there's some really interesting stuff around how SAP is designing AI processes and combining these probabilistic LLM technologies with what you might call more deterministic things that users can trust. And how do you put all that together is a really big issue right now to get the reliability and accuracy that customers want. The knowledge graph thing is very interesting. I'll be writing about that. What you're referring to specifically is SAP's foundation model. SAP is doing a lot of different things with knowledge graphs, but the foundation model is the big one because that one is going to essentially allow customers to have all this intelligence on SAP systems built into their AI models that SAP is like building. And this is a really big project, and SAP is taking its time with it because it needs to make sure that this actually is going to be a good thing when it's actually put into live systems, because a lot of AI things sound great on a whiteboard like mine, and then you try them out and they don't. But in theory, it's really good because it's all about feeding these systems with data that you can't get from an out of the box LLM, because simply they aren't trained on that. It's trained on the open web. It's not trained on the meat of tabular transactions across end-to-end process flows in the supply chain. So it's going to be really interesting to track this. And knowledge graphs, like you're saying, are really intriguing from an AI standpoint because they can illustrate relationships that are not clear from the standard vector format that is often used for contextual information to update AI systems. And the other cool thing about knowledge graphs is it's incredibly expensive to update LLMs. But it's not expensive to update your knowledge graph. So you can update it frequently with updated content and have that feeding into your AI architecture. How best to do that and to get the LLM to take that data and not use its own data. These are really complicated, interesting questions. But I got an article coming out on that, and it's something I'm going to continue to watch because it's a lot for customers to absorb, but I think the big takeaway is SAP is trying to make it possible to really draw on a lot of data sources for your AI that aren't possible for you to consume from a off-the-shelf chat GPT type of model. But there is a kicker there, which is there's a lot of data quality concerns inside your own organization that are going to play a key role here. And thus the business data cloud kind of forces the conversation of what is the state of your current data platform strategy internally. And it's not going to be possible to put off those questions any longer if you want to have halfway decent AI inside your organization. So.
Right. Yeah, I think the knowledge graph is super exciting from the perspective as a former software developer, right? Because basically what you used to do is you would talk to business users, try to distill their knowledge and put it into code, and then somehow through screens and reports, give it back to them, right? And it would always be a compromise. It would never be perfect, right? It would always be, a compromise, right? And now for the first time, I think it will be even for the most senior SAP developers who've been there from day one, which not many are there from 1992 anymore, right? To go back and see what kind of relations over time have been put by talking to customers in the SAP system, which have not even been uncovered to the end users. Right? So, but somebody said that, but we never managed to build the screen. We never work center as a modern word, right? We never managed to build the report or the BW analytics or the insights app or the intelligent app for that, right? But the knowledge for that, which is reflecting the real world, because a business user will only tell a software technologist to build that, is in the real world, is in the schema and is in the code, right? So that will be super, super exciting, super interesting. So I have my fingers crossed that this works for the overall industry, because it will be full circle of business best practice knowledge codified in software, never displayed in easy, intuitive to use way, transaction codes, whatever, but the best way to do it. And now we have a human way of saying, if I raise my cost on this product more, what might be happening? What do I need to look at, right? What do I need to consider? And it's all codified, right? It's not speculation and so on. So it's going to be super interesting.
One of the holy grails of our industry, right?
Yes,
one of the holy grails.
Did you catch my usually subdued German excitement on that?
I did. Should we do Should we do an Easter egg for the viewers that made it to the end, which is your brouhaha you caused in the analyst community with your phony dinner invite? That was awesome. But anyhow, Holger got invited to a dinner that he wasn't supposed to go at. That was hilarious, and you actually showed up. That's awesome.
I showed up. and I saw nobody who was there. And there was
my
a
God.
go-to-market issue between Constellation Brands, which was invited, and Constellation Research, which was invited, and I showed up for the dinner, but it
But
wasn't
in the meanwhile, you caused this whole brouhaha because you're like, John, you going to the analyst dinner? I'm like, what dinner? And suddenly everyone's freaking out about no one got invited to the analyst dinner except for Holger. And then Holger's off to this Constellation Brands dinner that you weren't even supposed to be at.
It was a service industry dinner, yeah. So
Yeah. And so I messaged you later. I'm like, well, did you actually at least get a meal out of it? And it turns out that they offered it to you at least, but
it wasn't
you
to my.
didn't,
They offered it, yeah. Fair
you
enough,
didn't want it.
Didn't want to get them in trouble.
Congratulations.
Wasn't to my organic standards. So the Easter egg is, if you hear this, if you tweet about this, if you put LinkedIn update or YouTube update, I need to check the YouTube comments, which reminds me of that. So if there's any, right? Sorry if anybody got.
You get a free dinner with Holger.
Yeah, free dinner with Holger. Yeah, free dinner with Holger. The next conference where you show up.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
Love it.
Yeah,
Pleasure,
and drinks
man.
on John. Drinks on John.
Drinks on me. Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. Thanks everybody for watching. This is always fun to do. Thank you so much, John, for being here. You see so many different other things that I see that we get traded to us. You have great access to customers, other parts. By the way, before I forget, that manufacturing customer, the sugar company, right?
Western Sugar, yeah.
Right. They're not formally known as Florida Crystals.
You know,
because Florida Crystals, like in sugar, SAP has innovation in sugar, right? This is the last part.
Let me do a quick search.
Here, right? Florida Crystals was the first in the cloud, but not for manufacturing, as far as I know, right? It was the first public cloud or something. That was the first in Florida Crystals in the past. And now it's sugar again. So
I believe there's no corporate connection, but sugar's been good to SAP.
Sugar makes the world go round and chooses
indeed.
SAP.
Indeed.
All right. Thanks everybody for watching. Thank you, John. Appreciate it. Thank you.